I remember having coffee with Mayan and meeting her for the first time. And we sat there and we went down the list of like, what's going to happen with this show. We were like, first of all, it's going to get picked up. You know, we're going to be a fall show. And you know what? You know, we're going to get 22 episodes. We are going to do a full season. And like, as an actor who has gone through a lot of ups and downs of expectations and stuff and learning that you can't have the expectations, everything we said at that coffee meeting ended up happening. And that never happens in this business. You can never guess that like these successes are going to happen. And I remember when we wrapped the first season, we looked at each other and we were like, everything we said happened. Like it happened. We did it.
Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. I'm Jenelle Riley from Variety. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the stars of Lopez versus Lopez, George Lopez, Mayan Lopez, Matt Shively, Al Madrigal, and Selenis Leyva. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely. This is an audience of your fellow SAG-AFTRA actors. So I actually always like to start by asking, how did you get your SAG card? And right before we started taping, Matt, you just said you're coming up on your 20-year anniversary. Do you remember how you got it?
That's Al. Al got that one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I got a few years. Yeah, I got a few years left.
I was going to say that's...
No, but we're pretty close. Yeah, I remember, I think it was probably stand-up, you know, as a stand-up comic, is like all the shows you do when you're starting out. So it was like late Friday in 2002. And then I did a show that never saw the light of day called The Ortegas with Cheech as my dad. And that was July of 2003. So that was like, yeah.
That's amazing. You know, I thought, Matt, I know you started young, but I was like, he's been doing this 20 years.
I think it's been 16, almost 16 years. So I'm getting up there.
Do you remember how you got your card?
Yeah, well, I remember the show that I was on was AFTRA, and it was before that they had merged, and I somehow went like 6 months shooting without having to join, and then I finally joined, and then yeah, it's just been ever since.
Oh, what was the show?
It was called True Jackson VP. It was a Nickelodeon show.
Oh, of course. Yeah. George is a big fan.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say.
George, what about for you?
Well, I could have gotten my SAG card doing an episode of Hunter that was on NBC, but it was playing a guy who was an illegal alien, and he gets pulled over. And there's a body in his trunk, and I said, "No, I don't think I'm gonna do that one." And they were like screaming at me, "But you'll get your SAG card." I'm like, you know what? I kind of don't want it like that. So I got my SAG card in '89 when I did Ski Patrol, which hurt no one.
Oh my God. I was so excited to watch an old episode of Hunter until I
didn't do it.
Okay.
I mean, forget the SAG card. You could have worked with Fred Dreyer.
I know. Looking back, I still would have done it, but it was nice to be asked.
Mayan, for you?
For me, I got mine relative, and I did a movie. I played a Japanese translator, believe it or not, but in a movie called Handsome, a Netflix murder mystery with Jeff Garlin and Natasha Lyonne. So I had a little part in there, and it was great.
I remember I saw it. It was good. You were good. It was like improv though, right?
Yeah.
Selenis?
I got my SAG card as a looping. I was part of a loop group. So for those, ADR work, and I started doing that before I got on camera, and it was I did a lot of theater in New York, and so I had my equity card, and I really desperately wanted to get my SAG card, and I did a show with this wonderful woman, Sandra James, that actually passed away not too long ago, who had a loop group in New York City, and she fell in love with me. I was like, I think I was about 18 years old, and she brought me on to the loop group, and I met a lot of amazing people, Yule and Lisa Vidal. Like, they were like all these like amazing actors that were doing looping, and I got to make a lot of money doing ADR work, like a lot of money, residual.
And by the way, that's really hard work. I think people have this idea that you can show up in your pajamas and just, talk into a mic, and it is some of the toughest stuff to do.
I agree. I think it was like wonderful to do as an improv. You have to go up there and be really quick, and it's a technique. So whenever I go in to do ADR work for films that I'm in now or television show, I am so good. They're always amazed at how good I am with the sync, and I'm like, I am a professional looper.
Well, again, thank you all so much for being here. Congratulations on such a wonderful show. I'd love to start with George and Mayan because I want to talk about how the show came to be. And I could be wrong, but I feel like we kind of have TikTok to thank for Lopez versus Lopez existing.
Yeah. Yeah, I finished Second City, studying at Second City, and it was during the pandemic, and I still wanted to be creative, like, a lot of actors out there, just itching to still be doing something. And I wasn't speaking much with George at the time. And I thought, well, I want to connect with people because I felt so isolated. So let me just focus on something I know, which is my relationship with my dad and my quote unquote daddy issues. So I focused on that, and I made a TikTok of someone who made one about some family drama. And I was like, you know what? That's not true. And I'm going to set the record straight. And I'm like, what will get people's attention? I'm like, oh, I know. I'll twerk upside down on a wall. Who's going to see it? I'm a comedian. I'll go for the joke. And lo and behold, at 2 a.m., I came up on the For You page of our showrunner and co-creator, Debbie Wolf. And she thought it was a great idea. Saw the other content I'd made with my parents. I'd made a whole series with them on their divorce, which, really helped sell the show with like George and Rosie, and seeing how that would be a successful dynamic to show on television. And we all got in a meeting together and was like, do we have something here? And I said, yeah, we think we do. And, my dad and I we never thought we would work together, but we just jumped on it right away.
Wow. And George, for you, what was it like having this come together? It sounds sort of surreal.
It's a bit surreal, that day that thing came out, it got a lot of attention. And I remember Anthony Anderson, we were golfing, and he's like, hey, did you see Mayan's TikTok? I said, yeah, I saw it. And he's like, what do you think? And I said, what can I say, man? I can't tell her not to do it. And he was like, word? And I'm like, hey. I said, hey, man, it's out there, So I was a little bit, because, we try to keep those things kind of, private, but TikTok opened up all those things in every avenue and everything that was personal. But, if I didn't mind talking about it, I didn't know that Debbie, would come up with this pitch. And then, she was working with Bruce Helford, who did my first show. And then when they pitched it to us on Zoom, Mayan said, there's some things that are kind of off limits. And then it had a really harsh tone. And then when we left the Zoom meeting, I was by myself upstairs. I said, there's got to be animation, I think, because I don't think you could talk to somebody like that in real life. And I called and said, is this animation? They said, no, this is, live action. Oh, all right. Here we are.
I'm curious about that. Did you have discussions? Are there things that are off limits that you agreed to, or did you sort of go in with the idea that nothing was off limits?
I think we all agreed that whatever Mayan was the most comfortable with in telling the story, that we would go with that narrative. Like, I being the ground zero of most of the issues that Mayan has had, that I was just really concerned about, her well-being. And, being a comedian can be painful at times, but not when you keep self-inflicting yourself. I think we just were like, whatever she was happy about talking.
It's strange because I think being a comedian for so many years, you've probably incorporated other people into your material. Is this the first time you've really been on the other side of that?
Yeah, it is. It makes you want to be better, I think. There's times for the things that I would do, and then there's times now which I'm maybe the best version of myself. But there was times when in the last 20 years that I probably would never even go back again to this. I think and 20 years ago, I thought, well, I'm going to live like this forever. And now looking back, I'm happy that I don't live like that anymore.
So in addition to the title characters, this show has such a fantastic supporting cast. And I'd love to ask the other actors how this project came your way and sort of what was your initial reaction to the premise? Was there any hesitation about working with a father and daughter? And let's start with Al, because I'm guessing playing Oscar, I mean, you've probably known George a long time. I'm guessing.
It's without making George blush too much. I mean, it's like, there's a Mount Rushmore of Latino comedians, and it's like he's on it. And I went to his star when I first got down to LA on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and I remember standing in the background and watching him do shots with his friends, like to celebrate the moment. And I was just like, it was like that Mean Joe Green moment in the tunnel with the Steelers. Like he looked over, and I don't even know if you remember this, George. He gave me like a head nod, and I was like, that is so cool. And acknowledged that I was there. And then we got to do a pilot for ABC. I think it was like 2017?
Yeah, around there.
Right. And it didn't go, but we had such a fun time working on it together that he said, you're going to play my friend in a sitcom. And here we are. So he sort of like, he foresaw, and there was a little bit of a prophecy going on with us being friends on a show because it worked out so well. So he willed it to happen.
I love that.
George, yes.
And the best part of that story is you didn't have to audition, it sounds like.
I did.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I did. No, I did.
I very much did. But I think I got the nod from the boss, so I'm happy about that. And it's amazing. Like my parents, we were massive George fans, and so my parents were all sappy, and so my mom cried, and it's say he had me on Lopez Tonight playing some characters too, and so they cried then, they cried, it's like everybody's crying, but we're all it's a dream come true.
Now they can cry on a weekly basis. I love it.
Yeah.
Matt, what about for you?
Well, I had done 3 pilots in a row leading up to this, and all of them hadn't gone. And so this was one of those rare occasions where when I got this script, I was like, this is the one that's going to go. There's no doubt in my mind. I remember telling my friend, I said, if Mayan can act, this show is going. And then we did it, and she blew it out of the water. And I was like, this is going to run. Like, we're going to do this. I think I was the hardest person to find. I think I remember getting the audition and being like, this is mine. I'm going to book this. And auditioning and getting a call back and meeting with Mayan and Debbie and not going forward. And then I had a buddy of mine ask me to put him on tape for something, and he came over, and it was the sides for this. And it was like 2 weeks later. And I was like, oh, and he's like making decisions. And I'm like, I would do it differently. And he had different sides and everything. And I was like, they didn't give me that option. And then like 2 weeks later, I happened to be in Florida filming something. And as I landed, I got a message saying that I was going to meet with producers and stuff. At the time, I had no idea that I was going to be actually reading with Mayan and George. And because I was in Florida, I had to like go out, buy duct tape and tape my phone up against the wall in this hotel room, which like is so difficult because I'm standing 5 feet away, and it's like this tiny little screen, and I'm sitting there with George and Mayan. And I remember the morning that we had it, they sent new sides, and it was all about how Quentin was Hispanic, and he I think he was like partially Mexican or something like that. And I was like, oh, well, this is not going to work out, but I memorized it anyways. And the first thing they said was, by the way, we're not going to read that. And I was like, are we sure? Because I memorized it. We're good. I can go. And then like an hour later, I got the call. It was awesome.
Oh, that's great. I was actually going to ask Mayan if you had some sort of a chemistry read with Matt, because you really feel like a real couple.
Yeah, no, we did. And it was very interesting because I did all the chemistry reads like through Zoom, which is, such an interesting way of doing things now. And we were all kind of afraid of like, am I going to be able to, is it going to be different, feeling that you have chemistry over the computer than you do in person? No, but with Matt, I felt completely very comfortable. And even Bruce, like we were reading, and he was like, well, you're reading it like you're in love with them, but the other actors aren't even looking at you through the Zoom, and they're not reading it like you're in love. They're allowing that screen to be a separation rather than just using what you have and still being able to connect. So that was a big difference with Matt. And I felt he was funny. really, and it's such an actor's thing. It's like we accidentally set those. That's like, we had to open it up, but actors, like we had the other actors being like, so I could read it like this. We're like, no. We accidentally sent out the sides, but all the like, white, but we're like, I think I could. And we're like, oh, like, it's okay.
Oh, that's great. And Sleeves, for you, what about this project interested you, and what's it like to get to go head to head as Rosie to George's character?
First of all, I still have moments where I'm like, I cannot believe that I'm playing with George Lopez, and like we're sparring at times, and it's, it was definitely something that I wanted to do. I've always wanted to do comedy. Like I'm known for all of my dramatic work, and so when Orange is the New Black became the phenomenon that it was, everyone just saw me as a character, Gloria Mendoza, forever and ever and ever. And every script that came my way was that type of character. So to be asked to audition for a sitcom on network, NBC, I was like Matt said, I remember looking at the sides and saying, this is mine. This is mine. I know every Latina under the sun is going up for this, because I don't know if you've noticed, there's not a lot of work for us. So when it comes out, people go crazy. So I knew that this was going to be that moment. And but I said, this is mine. This is mine. That's it. I was doing Creed. I was shooting Creed in Atlanta, and I had a little break, and I was in New York, and I set up my Zoom, and here goes George Lopez pops up on the screen, Mayan Lopez, and true story, I will not stop saying it, I was sweating profusely. Like it was so embarrassing, and all I kept thinking is, thank God for Zoom. Because if they only knew what was happening at this moment, they would be like, yeah, the sweaty girl, the sweaty chick. It was pretty good. Like it was really offensive. It wasn't smelly, but it was just a lot.
I'm picturing Albert Brooks in broadcast news.
It was. I really was like, oh my God, can they see this? And I was looking at myself in the Zoom, and I was like, okay, they can't. And I had a pink sweater on that I also wore for the callback, because as any actor, you have your beliefs and you hold on to, your lucky sweater. This one worked, I'm gonna wear it again. And so I wore it, washed it, but still it covered the sweat. So moral of the story, ladies and gentlemen, just wear something that doesn't hug your body in case you have that moment.
I'm going to ask now, because you've got the part, you're great on the show. George and Mayan, honestly, could you tell she was sweating?
No.
I was just too focused on like the second that she exited the Zoom, we were like her, it was, we saw other people, but we were like, no, everyone had to kind of compare to Selenis, because she had such, the strength. It was hard to find an actress that could still have the strength to go against George, but also have the heart, and Selenis equally beautifully encapsulates both in everything that she does.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen, I knew, like you said, there's a lot of actresses. We've seen a lot of actresses, and over the last 20 years, I've known a lot of those actresses, and it's almost, if you have like a machine, but then there's a better machine, there might be one in Europe. Like, I remember we got this guy, this espresso machine, and he says, oh, this thing is the best in the world. I mean, that's the world. When she opened her mouth and those words started to come out, you could feel the weight of what she was saying, but also delivering in a way that it wasn't mean. It was like just kind of, you could sense the relationship, and you could see the time in a person's relationship, even though we had just met. Now, that's just what's so fascinating about acting, is that she created this thing that no one could see, but everybody could feel.
I mean, did most of you meet for the first time, like at a table read, or when you were working? Because it sounds like this was largely cast over Zoom.
Matt and I got coffee shortly after, like, he got cast, and immediately we bonded immediately. And we're like, that we're gonna do this. Like we made a joke that we're like, we're gonna get ourselves a place with a backyard. Like we're gonna go, and that was like our thing. We're like, we're getting a backyard. We're getting a backyard. Like this is gonna go for like a really long time. I'm like, I'm in it with you. You're in it with together. And then we had, I think I like met Selenis a little bit after, and Alec I'd known throughout the years, but I think the first time that we were able to read it over the table read which was the network table read, that was like,
Matt has those things that remind you of how great things are when something totally unexpected happens. Like he had been close to some shows, and whether you have or you haven't, it's such a disappointment. But you get there and then it doesn't go. And a lot of times people have been out, like George Clooney was out for he had like 25 pilots, and these things don't go. So when we got picked up and he hosted this thing, and his joy was so real that it reminds you of what this business is. Like you called somebody a star because the stars are in the sky. It's something that seems unreachable, unattainable. And then if it's happened to it happened to me 20 years ago, and you it's a different sense of things now, and you see somebody that is just so happy to be working and so good at what he does. And it reminds you and restores a faith in, walking into an empty stage and see all the best equipment that anybody could ever buy. But then the pieces that are moving in there, like Matt and Al and Selenis and mine, that's what makes this whole thing work.
And we didn't just book any show. We booked a show that ended up getting 22 episodes on a network and sort of kicking ass on Friday nights and holding its own, and then got moved to Tuesday. That's like the #1 show with English speaking Latinos in the United States. Like it's pretty exciting. So we just didn't. It's just not another standard booking. This is the one that has legs, and that's why we're all so thrilled to be working with each other. It's just a great group. I think.
So I think one of the coolest things about all of it was I remember having coffee with Mayan and meeting her for the first time. And we sat there and we went down the list of like, what's going to happen with this show. We were like, first of all, it's going to get picked up. We're going to be a fall show. And you know what? We're going to get 22 episodes. We are going to do a full season. And like, as an actor who has gone through a lot of ups and downs of expectations and stuff, and learning that you can't have the expectations, everything we said at that coffee meeting ended up happening. And that never happens in this business. You can never guess that like these successes are going to happen. And I remember when we wrapped the first season, we looked at each other and we were like, everything we said happened. Like it happened. We did it. And then we got season 2, and I'm like, okay, now it's a whole new list. Let's create a whole new list.
I wanted to ask Selenis, because you do feel this chemistry with you and George and Mayan. Like you really do feel like a family. And I feel like it's kind of strange to put random people together and say, like, act like you've known each other your whole lives. I mean, maybe it's not weird for George and Mayan, but did you meet the person Rosie is based on at all? Did you base her on anyone yourself in your life?
I think Rosie's definitely a combination of people. I think she's a combination of all the mothers, all the Latina mothers out there. A little overbearing, very loving, opinionated, fun, all the things. And I had the pleasure, and I love Mayan Lopez, which is Mayan's mother and George's ex. And I connected with her immediately because of the love that she has for Mayan. Like I immediately understood her. And so I took a little bit of that, I took a little bit of her. I took a little of my mother, of Debbie Wolf's mother. I think it's literally a combination of just what it is to be a mother. Whenever I approach anything, I'm like, make it human, make it real. And that's why I was able to connect with who Rosie is. I raised a young lady as a single mother, so I understood that. My relationship with the ex, it wasn't always, smooth sailing, but at the core of it is always like, make it as full as possible, make it as full of love. It's complicated, humans are complicated. So Rose doesn't hate George, there's a love-hate, there's a pain, there's all kinds of things. So that was important for me to make sure that comes across. The love for Mayan was very easy. I love Mayan from the moment I laid eyes on her. I loved her and I wanted to take care of her. She reminds me of my child. And so I just knew that I was going to have a good time with her. And with George, you know, I mean, listen, this is an icon, a comedic icon, and you better bring the best. And so it meant a lot to me. Whatever doubts I had about going into this world of multicam, I knew that I got the approval of George Lopez. Like, I wouldn't be Rosie if George Lopez felt that I couldn't play with him, that I couldn't go, you know, tit for tat. So for me, whenever I doubt myself, I go, no, you wouldn't be here if they did not feel that you could play with the George Lopez. So I love playing Rosie.
In an episode of the birthday show that we did, she was so good. You know, we had the aunts come, the characters from New York, and come in there. And, you know, they had a big scene in the backyard, but I was watching, you know, all the stuff. And then I just saw her in a different way, you know, doing all these things. And I was like, wow, man, that's amazing. That's great. That's great. And I went out there and I told her, I said, I'm watching what you're doing. I said, man, you're doing it great. I just want you to know, you're doing it great. You're great.
And then the sweat started happening.
It's like wardrobe.
It was like the sprinklers went on.
Speaking of family, I also want to bring up the young actor Bryce Gonzalez, who plays Chance. I know he's fantastic, and I'm sort of curious about the casting process. I mean, especially when casting young actors, I think it has to be very specific.
He's offer only.
He's offer only.
He was offer only, actually. He, at 7 years old, he had an overall deal potentially with Nickelodeon, and so we had offer only. And Debbie and I, we were both looking for kids. We had both almost at the same time sent TikToks that Bryce had made with his father, and we sent them immediately. We're like, this is him. Like, it has to be him. And he even just threw, you know, he would be doing ad libs on TikTok or like mimicking the sounds, but just his mannerisms. I'm like, you could just tell that he has it. And you know, during the pilot, I have to say we were a little nervous of like how he was going to do it, but he was telling us our lines, and even still, like, he'll be like, I can get it. I'm a professional. Like, he'll even say that still. And he, you know, already knows how to, you know, pause if we have a live audience and it gets a laugh and we do another take, he knows to wait. And no one's really taught him like that. You know, there's some things that he's had to learn, but a lot of things he does pretty naturally.
Well, I'm going to say that the funniest thing he ever did, Ellen and I were shooting this thing outside of the neighbors, like the guys from in the middle, they were on the show, and he and I were looking over, and Adam, the acting coach, was talking to Bryce, and he had the mask on, and Bryce grabbed the tip of his mask and pulled it so it's away from his face, and then he let it go, and it goes back onto his face, and I was like, did you see that? And then I said, hey man, does he do that all the time? And he's like, no, that's the first time he ever did it. Because he was telling him what to do. Hey, don't remember when you get to the door, you got to do this. You got to do this, okay, buddy? And he just went like this and pulled that thing and let it go. And just like, oh my God. Like, what the? I mean,
yeah.
That was so, like,
That's what you need.
he's like, I got it. Think, like,
incredible.
That's amazing.
I've said it many times, and I'm probably a little biased, but I truly believe the kid is like the greatest child actor of all time. As Mayan was saying, like, a 7-year-old who knows how to hold for laughter is an anomaly. And the episode that we did where we did the telenovela at the end, we did 2 takes of it, and on the 3rd take, I'll never forget it. He looked at me because he knew the audience was absolutely loving it. And he looks at me and he leans in and he goes, watch this. And they did it again. And that was the take they ended up using, where he just kept falling and falling until he was just on the ground, like sideways. And I was like, the kid literally is feeding off of this audience. And for a 7-year-old to know how to do that, it's just unheard of. It's like crazy.
Yeah.
I caught one moment just real quick, and I told George about this. With the director John, walks in between takes. We do a first take, and then comes up to tell Bryce, new notes, new line. We're going to switch this up, and he just looks at me and goes, "Yeah." And walks away, and then just kills it and doesn't hesitate. He's like, "Yeah, I got it."
It's amazing.
Yeah, he's like 8 going on 30. He just turned 8,
Yeah.
like 8 going on 30. Sometimes it's just like, okay.
So between Bryce and then also you have some other, very established comedians here. I'm curious if there's any improvising on set or if you stick pretty closely to the script.
I know my dad George improvises. I feel like, I think now it being my first, I think next season I'll start to get a little more comfortable with doing it, but George goes off and off.
Yeah, luckily, they created an atmosphere for us that we get to hang out in the moving van parked out in front. So that's always been any scene that is hanging out with George in the van is always loose and fun. Again, you got great comics and great actors working. It's like yes, but I remember doing scenes with Matt. I've said, can we have one? And
The tamale, the water for chocolate.
Oh,
Christmas is so fun.
Really?
that was ridiculous. That was ridiculous. Selenis and I even went and we were just cackling on the side because
We pulled up our chairs. We were like, we're gonna sit right here and we're gonna watch. And I think someone was like, "Oh, do you think they'll be nervous?" I said, "They love this.
They love this."
And it was wonderful to watch. And I think that's the beauty of this cast is that we all have so much fun playing with each other, but it's also so great to watch. I'll be in my room if I have a quick change or if I have something, but I'm watching the monitor in my room. I'm just like laughing out loud because you catch these little things that we do, and they're just brilliant. And I honestly can't think of a better cast to go on this ride with. Everyone is not only amazing at what they do, but they're also just very generous with their time, they're there for you. I've been on sets where maybe sometimes not so much, it's like, it's when it's your take, they give everything. And then when it's your turn, not so much. Here, everyone is on it. Everyone is always ready to play. And that's the beauty of this show. Like we really, honestly, everyone is listening and ready to give it to each other. Like there are moments where I can see the twinkle in George's eye and I'm like, oh, it's gonna happen. Something is brewing.
He gives you the wink.
He gives you the wink. And so I do what any professional actor does. Bite the inside of your mouth really hard so that you don't lose it in a take.
Was gonna ask that. Who's the biggest breaker, the person who laughs the most?
We actually don't. I don't think we break very often. We're very professional, which is
even our gag reel wasn't a lot of
No, we've been really good at staying in it, and the moment they say cut, we lose it. But I don't know. I've always had a problem with breaking, and I for some reason with this show, it just isn't there. I can think it's hilarious, but I don't lose it. I live in the moment, and it always ends up working out. And I don't think we break that much. I know I've broken with Al a couple of times because he'll just do some random things that completely throw me off. But aside from that, we're always usually pretty in it.
This group, I can say this, I know this for a fact, and I've been on a good number of shows that have not, that everyone's gotten along. And I know probably you do these where people come on and they say how much they like each other. I've hung out with this cast more than I've hung out with all of my casts combined. And I've been on friendly with a ton of people that I've worked with, but this group hangs out and we're all so comfortable with each other. We legitimately are friends.
We just had dinner last night.
Yeah.
Last night, and Al and I are having a date later with our partner. So we can't get enough of each other. True story.
Love that. The story, obviously, it feels very specific in many ways in what it's telling, and yet it's also very relatable for everyone. I'm sort of curious about finding that balance, especially in what's a family sitcom, between this very specific story, while you also you don't shy away from these very real issues of estrangement and parenting. Are those conversations you're involved with the showrunners?
Yeah. No, I think, Debbie interviewed my dad and I both before writing the pilot. And we kind of each gave our own personal histories, but no, it is quite a collaboration, I think, with certain topics that we know before going into certain episodes. I think, the anxiety one was one that was a big one as well. And then, the second chances episode of playing on, that time that we weren't apart and kind of showing a flashback of that. I think it was something to figure out, because at least for me, I was playing a version of myself, but she's different than me, but we have similar experiences. And, I think I had to find the balance of revisiting that trauma, not reliving it. And you can look at it and it's really says time is everything, and comedy can sometimes just be tragedy in time. And now it's just enough time has passed that we can really get those nuggets of authenticity. And sometimes there would be moments, like I think my dad can speak to it, where we're just going to talk to each other. We're just going to really have this conversation. And that authenticity that you can feel it through the screen, which I think is why the fans have responded so well to it. So what do you think,
George,
Deb?
for you, is this therapeutic in some ways?
I think we did a lot of it in the first show, but then it's different with Mayan. But to the humor is great, but also to get to a level of emotion that blended with the humor, that's very tough. Selenis and I did a thing for Christmas, and I said I'm gonna dig in a little bit, and all I said was I'm not bad, I just make mistakes, and it just changed everything. And that Christmas episode where they're all in the living room and having a great time, and I'm upstairs and I walk away. It's like when we got divorced and separated, they still had big Christmases and I didn't. And all of that is it's a little bit tough, but then that in the legacy of TV that that you're leaving something behind that you've never seen before. I mean, I watched I Love Lucy and watched Freddie Prinze, and I watched all these things that I'll leave my mark, and my mark will be right up there with theirs, if not the things that I've left behind. So I love the fact that we were able to bring people to TV that people had not really ever seen before in a way, but then also to leave a pillar of Belita Moreno and Constance and Valente and Selenis and Al and Matt and Mayan, like that. It's just beautiful to be able to have done that and be part of that.
I mean, if nothing else, you're iconic. You have one of my favorite lines ever in a movie that we use all the time from Balls of Fury, of all things. I love that movie unabashedly. When someone says the guy you're looking for looks like George Takei, and you go, "It's not. We checked." And finally, obviously, the show's been picked up for a season 2. Kind of curious if you have any idea where your characters are going, if you have places you think you'd like them to go, or anything you can tease about the new season.
Yeah, I think we've had ideas brewing. I think with the strike, there's only so much that we can work on. I think for me, I would love the dynamic of, we left off with George starting his sobriety journey, but I think a lot with that you don't realize in recovery is that the people that are their support system have to learn and grow with them too, and keep giving them chances. And I think having that mirror kind of focused on them of, why aren't they still trusting him, and, them having to work. And I think that is an interesting dynamic that hasn't really been seen on TV, is the other side of actual, recovery, and, all of our crazy dynamics, and, us four, maybe Al tries to be like his sober buddy too.
Yeah, does me to Oscar.
I just think us three just spiraling, being like, oh no, what we got what we asked for, and what does that,
Right.
What does that mean?
I would like wedding bells.
Yeah. It's,
I don't know, maybe it's time to get
So
married. I don't know.
I know Rosie would love that. It's like,
would love that. Rosie wants to plan a wedding, so why don't we, focus season 2 on the engagement and then
Yeah.
lead into season 3 with a wedding. Let's but definitely I would love to see a wedding happen. And with I want them to continue to explore the dynamic of George and Rosie. I think that there's a lot there that still needs dissecting. I love when we go back and we revisit them prior to where they are. Those flashbacks are always just amazing. I love that. And, I don't know, maybe Rosie starts to date. What would that be like? That would be fun to explore. Rosie still has it.
I'd love to see that. I think those things are great, dating and it's almost like high school going again, you don't like the guy, I don't care if you like the guy, and if you see something that you don't like and you say something just because you don't like him. But, I've said things to somebody that I shouldn't have said and taken a chance, although it was true, and they didn't believe me. And then later on, it turned out. So those things, are when friends, say something and you don't like it and maybe it affects the friendship, but then you go back and it turned out to be a reality.
If I can make one request for season 2, as much churro as possible.
well.
Yes, Noelle. She's my favorite She's my favorite co-star. Don't tell anyone.
I'm saying
Noelle's a rescue. Like, they found her. We were trying to find dogs and they rescued her. She was like literally going around like one of the freeways and they figured her out. And so we saved her, put her in show business.
Wow.
And now she works more than all of us combined.
It's true.
That dog, I see her once a week on a different show or movie. I'm like, oh, what? Like, she literally works more than any of us. Crazy.
I love that. Well, again, congratulations on a great show. And on behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and process and craft with your fellow performers and for joining us today.
Absolutely. It's an honor.
Thank you.
Thank you.